So in this video, I'm going to quickly explain my reasoning behind why I decided to let the Lotus Exige go recently, and also why I currently have 0 cars basically in my possession. It's a pretty sucky situation to be in, but it was also a very purposeful position I put myself in. And that's mainly because of the housing situation here in my area. I currently live in the San Francisco Bay Area in California. So the long story short is my next goal is to try and get myself into a house. But that also hasn't just been like a short-term recent goal or anything like that. It's been something I've been working towards for the past, who knows how many years, like the past decade, whatever. But obviously it's a lofty goal. It's a high mountain to climb. And I'm going to explain exactly why that is and put things into perspective in this video. So just on that note, cars have always been like a secondary thing for me. It's always been like basically a hobby, true to the word. It's never been something that I've put most of my main, income towards. It's always been more discretionary funds. And then of course, recently I decided to let the Lotus go because, I think I mentioned this in the previous video, but having that much, cash sitting in a car in a garage that never really gets driven didn't make too much sense to me. So that was the compelling factor for me to say, hey, let's be a little bit more sensible. It's probably around time to where I need to pull out a little bit. So I decided to do that and add that towards the house fund. Honestly, it didn't make like a giant, life-changing difference. It just made a big dent to it, which is helpful. And the funny thing is, I remember back in the day, I saw these people who were like in their 30s or whatever. They all got married, they all had kids, and then they all eventually, got houses and they sold all their cool cars. I'm like, man, these people are suckers. Like, why are they doing that? And now fast forward to now, I'm basically eating my own words because I'm in the same exact position. No kids, no wife or anything like that, but still I'm selling all my cars. Now let me just break things down really quick and show you guys how skewed and off balance things really are here in the SF Bay Area in California. Because if you look at the United States at large, the median house price for the entire US is about $230,000. Median as in right in the middle, dead center in the spectrum. And now the median house price in just, for example, San Francisco in particular is $1.3 million today. Now let's dig a little bit deeper on this equation because if you look at the median household income across the US, that's currently at $63,000 a year. And if you look at the San Francisco median household income, that's at $96,000 a year. And now when you start comparing these numbers together, that's when things start looking pretty whack. Because what this means is the US household income, the median household income is about 27% of the US median house price, while the San Francisco median household income is only 7% of the San Francisco median house price. To pay off the house at those median rates, it would take somebody living in San Francisco almost 4 times as long as it would somebody living in the US at large. Okay, so let's bring things back a little bit and look at the entire Bay Area as a whole instead of just the city of San Francisco. So obviously the average house price across the entire Bay Area is going to be a little bit cheaper, but in my own personal research over the years, honestly, I don't think it's that much cheaper. And honestly, if you're looking underneath that $1.3 million mark, from what I've seen for a single family home, and if you're trying to buy in a good area, you're most likely going to be buying a shack or some sort of fixer-upper, or you're buying something out in the boonies where there are probably going to be crackheads roaming around, or it's just going to be super far away from work where you have to deal with the immense traffic that we have here in the Bay Area, which is extremely not fun. So I think that really does narrow down the scope, and honestly, $1.2 to $1.3 million is about what it takes these days to get into a nice, decent house in the Bay Area. So all that is good and all that is cool when you know the total price, you know what the ultimate, budget goal is to get to, but that still doesn't explain the full picture until you actually break down the monthly cost of said home at that price. So let's do that really quick right now. Let's get things on paper and then you can really see, I think, this way, quickly, what this all entails. So now I have this mortgage calculator pulled up. We're just gonna go with $1.2 million for the home value. We won't even go with 1.3. Let's put that in there right now. So now the common rule of thumb is when you're trying to buy a house is you want to have 20% of its total price saved up as a down payment in good old American US dollar cash. So this is where things are gonna fall apart, I think, and I'm gonna show you exactly why. But to keep moving forward, we'll put down 20% of $1.2 million. That's going to be $240,000 as a down payment. Now the difference of that leaves us the loan amount of $960,000 that we need to go ahead and mortgage over a fixed term of 30 years. And now just recently the Feds have been dropping interest rates, and now that means the mortgage rates today is currently underneath 4% at 3.8%, which is pretty decent. So now for the next box, the property tax. This is of course something else you have to accommodate for when you're trying to buy a house. And this will of course vary from state to state and also from county to county. So the average property tax rate in California is about 0.77%. And I think there are actual additional small taxes on top of that are levied, but we'll just go with 0.77%. So that leaves us with $9,240 a year that we have to pay in property tax alone on this house. PMI, that stands for private mortgage insurance, and that only applies for people who are trying to get a mortgage with underneath a 20% down payment. But because we're not playing any games here, we have that 20%. This does not apply to us. Home insurance, this is another mandatory thing you have to pay. So this can vary from about $300 to maybe $450 and more a month. We will go with $300, so let's do that per year. That's going to be $3,600 a year in just home insurance. Monthly HOA, we'll leave that at 0 for now. All right, so now let's go ahead and take a look at the breakdown of this monthly expense for this house. So now you can see right off bat that your total monthly payment, in addition to the mortgage and all these other things that we added in, is about $5,500 a month. So I don't know about you, but this part is really where things break down for me in terms of trying to buy a house here in California. Because honestly, I think saving that 20% down payment is actually the easy part. Yes, $240,000 is definitely a lot to try and stack up in just cash, but time is on your side with that thing because you can at least slowly build that up as long as you're smart with your money and as long as you start early. You can get to that number. The hard part is trying to maintain and sustain said house for the next 30 years at $5,500 a month. And depending on your income, that could really leverage you because if anything goes wrong in the next 30 years and you're not able to pay that $5,500 because that payment is not going away, you're in pretty big trouble. And in my opinion, operating at those type of margins does not sound very fun because the term house poor definitely comes to mind here. So this isn't like a mathematical or scientific thing or anything like that, but I personally think to be comfortable and to have enough buffer, a house payment should only be about maybe at most 50% of your monthly income, because then of course that leaves you room to do other things like save your money up for other things like retirement, put clothes on your back, buy food, and of course do ignorant things like play with cars. So there's also a few things we have now factored into this monthly house payment. That also includes utilities like gas, water, electricity, garbage, internet. And when we did the calculation, we did not put anything down for HOA, homeowners association fees. So if you're trying to buy a house in a somewhat modern neighborhood, you most likely will have to pay HOA fees. That's just the name of the game. So realistically, this house already is looking more towards about the $6,000 a month range. And that's pretty spicy. So how do you make this more economically feasible in the long term to actually sustain? The way I see it, that 20% down payment rule does not apply for California. So I think you gotta be able to take a bigger chunk out of the entire house price in the very beginning with a down payment, because then of course, that's going to lower your monthly expenses. So now you can really see how stressful and difficult it is to buy a house out here. It's something that I've been personally stressed about for the longest. And I almost feel like this is like a moving target. The more and more and the longer I've saved, the more expensive houses become, because unfortunately, I wish I was born like 5 years earlier, because then I would have been in a better position to take advantage and capitalize on that 2012 recession era. But of course I wasn't. And of course, house prices have since rebounded after the recession, and then they spiked up through the roof and held there. So that's why it makes it really hard for people in my age group to try and get into a new house here in California. And that's also why sacrifices like selling the Exige, selling the G-Wagon, selling all my cars, really consolidating down, really being a minimalist in terms of my financial spending is so important. So honestly, there are only really 4 obvious things I think that you can make buying a house here in California easier. So number 1 is you can have double income. You might need to have a spouse that is carrying his or her weight in terms of the monthly income flow. That can really make, for example, that $6,000 a month or so monthly expense a lot more easier to manage, because then you'll still have money from the other person's income to put into other things. And it's also pretty common to have people who have quadruple income inside just one house, or they even have like multiple families or 2 families living together under one roof. And the second way you can more easily buy a house here is you need to have equity already built in this area. So for example, maybe you bought a house here a long time ago. That has obviously gone up in a lot of value, and now you have equity from that you can pull out to then go buy another house. And the third way, and I think this is the most interesting, is you need to basically come across a lot of wealth pretty fast. And that's pretty commonplace here in the Bay Area. And the reason why houses here in the Bay Area are so expensive is because there are so many people who make a lot of money in this area from tech, for example. There are a lot of overnight millionaires from all these IPO companies, all these startups, companies like Apple, etc. So for example, if you work at a startup here in the Bay Area, and that company goes public or it gets acquired, the options that you have with the startup then become worth a lot of money, most likely. You can cash that out, and boom, all of a sudden you have a big fat down payment to throw down a house, and it makes tackling that problem so much easier. For example, there are over 70 billionaires alone in just San Francisco. That's like ranked number 3 in the entire world, behind like Hong Kong and New York, I think. And the fourth obvious way to buy a house more easily at these type of prices is you just need to make a lot of goddamn money. And the fifth bonus way to buy a house more easily here in the Bay Area is, honestly, the reality is you have to lower your expectations. Instead of buying that average price $1.2 to $1.3 million house, I think, in a decent area, you have to go a little bit further out, buy something a little bit cheaper, buy something a little bit smaller, maybe go into a condo first instead. So now to wrap things all up, that is the main reason why I thought it would be prudent to let go of the Lotus Exige. But that also doesn't mean I'm completely outside of the car game. I'm quitting or something like that. I still want a car, but I am going to downgrade my ambitions with a car. So in terms of more expensive cars, would I want something newer and more expensive like a GT3 or something like that? Of course I would, but time and place, again, is not right. I don't think that is the wisest choice for me to do right now, so I have to really be economically mindful and not do that. But the positive light is I think you can still have a lot of fun and get a lot of value from cheaper cars. You don't necessarily have to spend like, 6 figures on a car to get most of the same type of experience. The key focus and the key word here is value. Like, you have to make sure you find a car that's at a good price point, that isn't overtaxed or super inflated like the Porsches are and the NSXs are. I'm going to personally stay away from them because I don't find those to be very, of course, valuable. But other cars, like for example, the E46 M3, I had 2 of those in the past. They're still around the $20,000 to $30,000 range for something decent. And I think that is good money for what you get in a car. And I had a lot of fun with those cars, so that's probably what I'm going to focus on. Let me know what you guys think in the comments of this video. I know the subject kind of deviated from the usual stuff that I usually talk about, but hopefully you guys enjoyed it. This type of things I think are the most important to actually talk about and understand and actually capture, because this is what really matters in life. Like, these are the things that are important. These are the big goals that you have to try and achieve. So please leave a comment in the video if you liked it. Give it a like. That'd be super helpful. And I'll see you guys next time here on Core and Balance. Peace.